here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more.
There's something I want to tie back to that you mentioned earlier, and you brought up another word, giver in that moment. This concept of like giving and receiving, these roles of giving, receiving, and we experience very optimal states of pleasure when we can take the opposite, like the polarity, the opposite ends of those roles. We can be fully present with that role. One pattern that I see often come into my office or come to my classes is either partners who are complaining this. How do I say this? Typically men, however, I'll open this to all genders, will have a difficult time with being the receiver, being in the receiving role. So they'll keep putting themselves into the giver role and giving the action or the pleasure to the other person. And when the person says, well, okay, now it's your turn, I want to give to you, they're like, no, this is just for you. I just want to give to you. And from my perspective, I'm picking up on insecurity there. There's a very vulnerable, it's very vulnerable to receive. It's very vulnerable to relax. And I'm curious if you see this pattern in men, or and what are your thoughts, or what would you suggest to somebody?
Well, I definitely identify with that personally, because from being in the sex educator role or doing similar work like sexological body work, where it's more one-way touch, right? I think Betty Martin really talks about like, one is giving, one is receiving. The other version is that I'm taking, right? And then the other person is allowing. So there's different flavor of that. So one on receiving, you could be receiving as in this person is giving you sensation and you just relaxing, you're not generating the sensation yourself. So I think the vulnerability comes with one, it's definitely more vulnerable to be on like the allowing state, right? Because it's anal level trust. On the second, I think the second part is that when people don't know how to get what they want in sex, is harder to ask for receiving, because one, sometimes people don't want to disappoint the other partner. It's like, what you're doing is not working for me, but I feel bad about saying that to you. So it's like, it's easier for me to generate the sensation because I know how to make my own body feel good. So I think they're developing the skill for sexual communication, where you could calibrate and talk about how you like to be touched is really important. So that's the play lab portion. So I don't think people could drop in really easily from not learning how to receive or be in the receptive role, then all of a sudden go like, well, I should receive now and be there. I think from like a philosophy standpoint, you're not allowing yourself to receive, you're also taking from the giver, because it's a really pleasurable experience for someone to be able to give to you. So if you're not willing to receive, you are taking, in the sense you're taking away the pleasure of this person who wants to give it to you. So I think the balance of a two-way street works really well. It doesn't have to be one like 50-50, right? Because it ebb and flow. But I think allowing yourself to taste both flavor is good and important.
Yeah, and even connect with a conversation if that is a pattern, or if there is, we're having a difficult time with our partner taking on that different role. This gives them a little more material to sit with and question and get curious about. Oh, maybe there is something that I'm trying to protect from.
To solve this problem, I was thinking like what sex hack back in the day would really help. So if you're on the receiving end and the giving end, like I play this game called a pleasure loop game. So the game is like, okay, so it's sort of like you're getting your Uber app. You want to make sure that the Uber is coming closer to you. Like there's progress. Very annoying when we don't get feedback. It's like, why you stopped for a whole 30 seconds? So the job of the receiver is to give accurate live feedback on where the car is. Is it moving or not moving? and the giver needs to know where to go, right? Like where to go. So we break down the instruction to more to only 3 things to make it a little easier. So you give location feedback, like higher, lower, left, right, more pressure or less pressure, right? And then speed. So there's only 3 things that you got to say to calibrate. And the last part is that when it starts to feel good, you have to give a consistent feedback that the person know that they're on track. So it could be in variation of sound, breath, or touch. So you could squeeze a little harder if you don't like to talk, or you could verbalize it, or you could moan, but you have to give a feedback that that person know that the car is coming. So if you could get into rhythm, I have found that people could really drop into it much quicker if you give them that framework, at least in the beginning. Then once they calibrate it, it's much easier afterward.
Yeah.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.